We're here in the Navajo Nation Council chambers with Navajo Council Delegate L.Tsosie. And you're sponsoring, or you sponsored the emergency legislation last week regarding...
Which one? I'm all emergency'd out.
I know you are. But you had emergency legislation. That one didn't get to the floor, though, right?
Which one?
The one that you had, I think it was at the bottom of the...
calling for a special election?
Yeah. But so what happened with that one?
It's still on the agenda.
Okay, so it can come up today then?
Tomorrow.
Oh, the council, okay.
It's on the council's agenda.
So it can come up tomorrow, all right,
Yeah.
okay. And that, okay, your amendment that you made regarding Navajo fluency, that extends to all the elected officials, right?
No.
No?
The way it is amended, it's only to the president's office, president election, office of the president.
Oh, okay.
And it leaves the others alone, because the last time we had a big fight over the council delegate provision, the school board. So rather than dwelling on those issues again, I just limited it to the president's office. And then we said if we need to address the others, we'll tackle that later on.
Okay. And was that the same language that was vetoed by President Shelley?
The veto one kept the word fluency in there, and then have that fluency be determined by the people at the time they vote. My amendment said that you must be able to speak Navajo language and English language, but that ability is determined by the Navajo voters. Similar.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So has that one gone to President yet?
I understand it's at his office.
It is at his office.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then the other amendment that you made was regarding the funding for the special presidential election?
No, not the funding, but what I did was...
Well, when the funding came up, it was right for $289,000.
What we did, was that we would hold the election no later than August 31st, 2015. And provided we put all the election puzzle back together. So people are negotiating all that stuff, and so we might have the election puzzle together by tomorrow.
And how does your emergency legislation for tomorrow fit into this puzzle?
Which one?
The one for the special primary election or special runoff?
Because if we have an agreement, we might use that particular legislation to set up the procedure for the special primary election and special general election. Then we would put in the time. Okay.
All right. There's a lot going on here then, right?
It is.
Yeah. So with all of these pieces of the puzzle, so the funding was left out of the $289,000. There's no funding available.
No funding at the moment.
Okay, until all the puzzles come together.
Yeah, then we'll probably fund it at that time.
Okay, and then why is this all being done? Why not just fund the special presidential election and have a presidential election?
Because there's no sense in funding an unfinished puzzle.
But I mean, what's unfinished?
We have to address, it's also dependent on what the president does. And then I've asked Russell Begay, in fact I was supposed to be working on a letter, to withdraw his candidacy. And then let's have we just want the people to vote again. There are too many people saying I'm not going to vote. We've alienated them from our electoral process. So just get them to vote again. I believe that that's the best solution we can have. Have the people vote, and then that's it. And then we'll work with whoever they give us.
Who's saying they're not going to vote?
The people. I've heard it at Coyote Canyon chapter. I heard it at Baca. Almost everybody is saying that. I already voted. I want to stick with my original vote.
Okay, because on the council floor you said that the reason this was all being done was, you used the term disenfranchised rural voters, that they had organized themselves into a group. And when I've interviewed them or heard them outside, they're very much supporters of disqualified presidential candidate Chris Cheney.
A majority of them are, yeah.
They all are. I mean,
I don't know if I could say it. They all are, but I don't brand them as this Cheney supporters. You know.
I mean, but why wouldn't they? I mean, there's only two candidates, or three so far. There was President Shirley, former President Shirley,
Yeah.
and then disqualified candidate Chris Cheney. And it wasn't until he was disqualified that you had this group organize themselves.
I didn't have the group organized.
No. I said, but
they did it themselves.
That that this
Yeah.
it wasn't until that happened that the group organized themselves. And when he was, when I was there at the hearings for his the election complaint regarding him not being truthful on his affidavit regarding his the Navajo language and there are presidential forums where he apologizes very nicely and says that he's still learning Navajo, and so, but it wasn't until then, and then when I was at the hearings, I heard him use the same language that the voters had qualified him, and he was qualified, and so why are they having the election hearing? I mean, the hearing on his election complaint.
Why?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the language you use to amend the fluency is what I heard from him. But you're saying that it wasn't done for him. But then some voters are
let me just tell you
okay.
this. I didn't converse with or conspire with Chris Cheney to craft a language. That's all on my own. So if that's what you're implying.
No, I just said that, the same language was there, and it's in the.
Who told me to work on this is Owen chapter? They said, we voted, do something. I told them I'll try my best. And
how many
answering
people?
a constituency chapter's call.
Did you have the chapter resolutions for the people then that told you to do this?
No.
You don't have the chapter
we had an open discussion over there. It's probably on their minutes.
Okay, but there's no chapter resolution.
There's no resolution.
Okay, from here.
But I gave my report, and that's when they, in that discussion,
Okay,
that's when they told me that.
all right.
And in fact, the person that was doing it was Jeanette Weiss. And so she said that we've all voted, and can you do something about it? And I said, I'll try my best. I don't promise anything, but I'll try.
Okay, so are there any chapter resolutions that you have?
Oh, I have a
asking
bunch.
for special? So are they attached to the resolution then, so people can look at them and
I don't have that, but we've had, when I say a bunch, I have a bunch of them saying that 10 to the judiciary branch, 10 to the Board of Election Supervisor, a bunch that says that, put this Cheney back in, all the chapters, but I didn't go to those meetings to promote it. They did it themselves. So we're getting those.
Okay, but you have the resolutions,
some
and they'll
copies,
be,
yeah.
and they'll be. Would I be able to get a copy of them so that people can see that they're actually
trying-
chapters
I've
passing
been-
resolutions?
I've been trying to save them. I'll try to get them for you.
Yeah, because otherwise it's kind of like
Yeah.
all we have is your word that these chapters pass resolutions.
I know you don't believe me.
And, well, that's the way reporters are. We're told, even if your
That's
mother
why the
said it,
reporter
make
really-
sure, that it's actual truth and
It's out
fact,
there,
Yeah. And then you had also said that that if there was a special presidential election between Mr. Russell Begay and Mr. Joe Shirley Jr., that the president would be illegitimate because
Will be deemed to be illegitimate.
because so many people wouldn't be voting.
Yep. And
And
also
that's why I was asking for the chapter resolution, so that we could get,
And
that the people
also
could get an
because-
idea of how many thousands of people wouldn't be voting. Because when I looked on the Navajo Election Administration website, during the primaries, their official, it was 9,800, I guess you could round it off to 10,000 had voted for Mr. Cheney. But and there was like 47% that voted in the primaries. But then when you look at the general election, it was like 54 or 55% voted. So the votes actually went up even after Mr. Deschini was disqualified and those presidential votes weren't counted. So what proof do you have that thousands of people aren't going to vote?
Because I don't have any proof, but what I said was a lot of people are saying they're not going to vote. We won't have the proof until the actual numbers come in after the election, if it stays on course as it is. But now, if we change it and go on a good PR thing, then we might have 90, 80,000 people voting, because then the people are back involved. But we won't know until after the election.
So what guarantee can you give to the people that this is not just being done for one politician, Mr.
I already
Deschini?
told you, I never conspired with or taught with Mr. Deschini to promote this. This was being done, I was told by Encino chapter to work on this. I was told now, being asked by a lot of Navajo people.
But you don't have a chapter resolution from Encino.
I don't have it because it was just a discussion. I don't need one.
Okay. All right.
So,
All right. So there's a possibility then that there'll be a new primary with all 17 candidates again?
or others, depending on how it works out.
But this is for the vote of the people, right? I mean, and there's 17, and there was people, all the people voted for their candidate, you know? And they didn't get into the top two, but, so who are you limiting it to then?
I'm not limited to anybody, just open it back up. That's what
To
we're
all
saying.
17?
All 17.
Okay.
And then let the people choose.
All right. So people had talked about having a special independent investigation of the elections. How do you feel about that still?
That might happen.
Because of what happened with the Supreme Court. So it would be independent. So it would be like the federal government might come in, or the U.S. Human Rights
I don't believe in
Commission.
that. I think we can set up our own independent panel here.
Who would it be? How would they be
I haven't
selected?
even given any thought. I'm too busy with the other stuff. So I'm not ahead of the game.
Okay.
If this is such a game.
Yeah. Well, you know, with the way that the language was changed for the president, it actually allowed for the current speaker, who doesn't speak that language, Navajo language fluency, or even Mr. Dwight Witherspoon or some of the other delegates, to now qualify to go over and be interim president.
Oh, I don't know. I've never done fluency tests on them, so I don't
Well,
know.
you know that fluency test was on the book since 1990, and the Navajo Board of Election Supervisors never defined it. So you know.
You mean the law was on there?
Yeah,
not
the law,
the test.
the law, but it's you know, when you're the lawmakers, you make a law, and it's up to the administration, the management, to define it, which was the responsibility of the election board, and they didn't do that.
So you're blaming me for that?
No, I'm just saying, you know, that there seems to
Yeah.
be this, you know.
So, well, that's one of the
You
reasons.
know, the election board doesn't even know what it has, how much power it has.
As a
you know?
lawmaker, when something is not being tended to, then sometimes it's better to change it. Because you entrust departments or people or administrators with it.
You know, but on one hand, you talk about the voters and how important the voters are.
Mm-hmm.
And so why didn't you let the voters decide on this, since this deals with the president? I mean, that's at large. And,
In a way,
and what kind of president they want, their qualifications.
I am doing that because it says it'll be determined by the voters.
No, I mean, to change that qualification, any kind of tweaking to it, you know, anything.
What you're talking is referendum. What I'm saying is that if the people make use of it and make use of it greatly, then, in my opinion, they've spoken on it. They like the process. But if they don't make use of it, then the numbers will be low. I leave it up to them. So that's why I called it a mini referendum.
Mini referendum.
Yeah. Because you're allowing the people to vote on it. And if they say yes,
So who are the candidates then, again, back to the special election?
the 17.
The 17, okay, so all 17, so there's going to be a new primary, and how much is this going to cost the people?
Well, it's the estimate we got from, this is going to happen anyway, so it's not my fault. Go ask the Supreme
Nobody's
Court
saying
for-
it's your fault. I'm just saying, you
I
know, trying to
you're-
get
you're-
an explanation
I think you're
of.
headed that way. It's 200 and some thousand. 237 or 235,000.
Okay, all right.
But the one that we saw, I don't know where that came from, 310,000.
And you know, when I was sitting back there and listening to the debate and everything else, and there was a lot of responsibility being thrown at the Supreme Court, Navajo Nation Supreme Court, in that dealing with some of the council delegate elections, and that the election office, which was Mr. Wanika, didn't properly inform his staff about, you know, what was going on with those elections that involved the election board, who had because of the contempt was a misdemeanor, and if any elected official, even you, were convicted of a misdemeanor, it triggers an election law that says you're automatically disqualified, and so, you know, you're removed from your position. You're also removed as a candidate, which is what happened with presidential candidate Chris Deschini. And it's automatic, but yet it sounded like the council or Mr. Wanika was holding the Supreme Court accountable for not directly telling him, yet he's the election director and he should know that that law is automatic.
Well, actually...
And so he would just do it. I mean, he's supposed to just do it.
Actually, when you look at the Title 11, remember, Section 300 and something, it spells out the qualification for the Board of Election Supervisor.
No, I'm talking about,
I know, I'm just trying to explain
if there's a misdemeanor,
But I'm just...
that
I
means
know.
that anyone who commits a misdemeanor, any elected official.
That's not true.
It's not
Because
true?
it's not true. We look at the qualification for the Board of Election Supervisors. Has nothing to do with misdemeanor.
No, it has to do with that they're elected, right? The election board are elected officials. No, they're not? They're not elected officials?
They are. But what I'm trying to tell you is look at the qualification. If they do not meet those qualifications anymore, if they don't maintain that, then yes, you could remove them.
No.
But the word, let me just explain to you.
Right, go ahead.
But the word misdemeanor or contempt is not in those qualifications. It has to do with theft and embezzlement. You know, if you look at that. And in fact, those same clauses you'll find in other officials' qualifications. But the word contempt is not in there. So you have the chief...
Is the word misdemeanor in there?
Not in the Board of Election Supervisors that I saw.
For elected officials.
But those are misdemeanor. But
For elected officials, Mr. Tsosie, is there a word in there that says
misdemeanor.
if you are convicted of a misdemeanor, you are automatically disqualified?
No, it does not, because it's a misdemeanor of theft crimes. Those theft crimes are misdemeanors. That's how, but the word misdemeanor, I didn't see in there in general where it says that for any misdemeanor. It's only for that's why they spelled it out. Embezzlement, theft, larceny, and others.
So if there are some voters, actually, they're talking about filing a lawsuit against the council because they're not following the law that the council as lawmakers enacted regarding elected officials, and not just, you know, going down to the nitty-gritty of this is specific for the election board, this is specific for the chapters or the grades. It's like there's one law, and it actually, you know, misdemeanor. And so you're sure of that. So, you know, that'll be good.
I'll even show it to you.
Okay. I mean, I'm talking about, you know, just misdemeanors and elected officials.
Keep your camera over there. I don't want you looking at other things.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Let's see. Okay. 300s. My computer's a little slow today.
Always, everybody's home from school, you know, so everybody's on the computers. Plus the weather, you know.
Qualification. Board members shall not have been convicted of a felony or any misdemeanor involving crimes of deceit, untruthful, or dishonesty, including but not limited to extortion, embezzlement, perjury, forgery, misrepresentation, or theft of Navajo Nation funds, property, crimes involving children, child abuse, child neglect, aggravated battery. That's it.
And so is contempt considered a misdemeanor?
No. This is a civil indirect contempt he did, and it's not in here, and the Chief Justice, in my opinion, overreached.
Oh,
And
okay.
then the other thing too is, this is section 324.
But,
So
but,
if when you read this, it says, board members must not have been found in violation by a trial court or the ethics and rules. It doesn't say anything about appellate court. So what the Chief Justice correctly should have done is send this back to a trial court and ask a trial judge to determine it. But he didn't do that. He decided to be
so why
an
didn't,
omnibus
so
judge.
why didn't, Mr. Deschini, who's an attorney, and he had, what, 3 or 4 different attorneys? Why didn't they do that for him, I wonder?
Do what? His is a different issue.
Question-
This is the Board of Election Supervisor issue, the qualification.
Well, why didn't the board do that then? They had the 10 days and they didn't
Because
appeal.
If you read my part in legislation, they were never given an opportunity for a hearing. I was there at Chenley.
Oh, they had two attorneys. They had Mr. Levon Henry. They had,
But no,
they hired
what-
Mr.
I
Stephen
understand what you're
Bose,
saying,
and
but what you
all
do
the
is-
time that I was attending the election board meetings,
I think
they
you
were
were there
going
too,
into
but-
executive
I know, but
session
what
with
you
the
do
Attorney
is-
General, Harrison Tsosie. I wonder why he didn't tell them this.
I don't know, that's their advice.
And actually,
but
Mr. Levon Henry was there too, and they
What-
were all in executive
what should
session.
have happened,
So it seems like they were given that opportunity.
no, they were not.
So
The Chief
the-
Justice knows better. Chief Justice can't do trial court work.
why didn't the Attorney General tell him that, or Mr. Henry, or Mr. Bose? Then,
Chief Justice doesn't need to be told that he knows.
I mean,
that.
in the appeal process, why weren't those questions brought up?
I don't know. I was not there at that time when they were drafting the memos. But my point, I look at this and there's nothing in here about an appellate court finding. It's the trial court.
Yeah,
Or
it
the
was
ethics
too
and
bad
rules.
their attorneys didn't bring that up, huh?
I don't know. I leave that up to them.
Or Mr. Deschini himself. That made sense. The election board put themselves
But
out
all
for
I'm saying
him.
is that when it says misdemeanor, it's not misdemeanor in general. It's misdemeanor involving theft, larceny, and others. It's very specific, and you just stay with that. There's nothing in here about contempt. There's nothing in here about others. It's just those things. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.